All right. All right. Today, June the 3rd, 2024, Parshat Bamidbar. Okay. So Parshat Bamidbar, this is a different world and a different it's a different book. Uh, to say at the outset that it is a book of numbers is uh, only because there's a census at the beginning, a census at the end. I actually think that the book of Shmot is a book of numbers, and the book of Bamidbar, which is called Numbers, is a book of names, because we get lots and lots of lists. One of my little pet projects is to try and um, splice out all the lists that comprise this book. For example, at the beginning in the first chapter, already you have the list of the tribal chieftains. At the end of the book, you have the list of all of the journeys of Israel, and you have very many lists in between. Next week, Parshat Naso, you'll have the list of the tribal offerings, and on and on and on. So it's a good exercise to do to see that almost in every parsha, every chapter contains consists of a list of some sort. Um, and the idea that the parsha presents already at the beginning is that it's we're going to have a census. The reason why we have a census is because it's to muster and organize the people in their entry into the land. The people is a set of tribes. The tribes have different sizes, um, and the there needs to be a kind of an organization both in terms of a military force, an organization around the sanctuary, which is situated in the middle of the camp, and that there are different clusters of tribes around the camp, such that it moves in a certain way across the desert with the tabernacle at the center. What I was focusing on in thinking about this parsha is the idea of counting, the tribes, and specifically, I wanted to just go a little bit into the rabbinic imagination on on the idea of counting, uh, in that there are some very important, ideas here. One important idea is that you're not supposed to count the people, or that the people will be too numerous to be counted. So already from the idea that you're to enumerate the population, there's a source of internal conflict here, because we're told in various places that the people will be too numerous to count, um, and that we're also told that they will be as numerous, excuse me, as the sand of the sea, the dust of the earth, and the stars of heaven. And those images are really important. They're important in the early promises that God makes to the patriarchs. And I want to dip into that for a bit in order to kind of help us understand what it means, how we relate to a population and how we relate to numbers. I guess it would be like, if we were talking about our families, um, we, we talk about how many people we have at our seders. Okay, so we can sometimes, we'll come up with a number of people that our tables can handle. Uh, we'll come up with a number of people that we invite, let's say, to a simcha, right? Because the caterer needs a number, so we get a number for the for purposes, for logistic purposes, right? You have 150, 200, 250. I mean, that those are quite sizable functions. And then you have estimates, okay? So for example, on a given week, I mean, I don't spend the time giving an accurate census of how many people are in shul on a given week. What I typically do is I estimate uh, based on, the even distribution of people in the sanctuary. So in the space of a few seconds, I can count up one side of the sanctuary to about 50 or 60 people, and I'll estimate that, since the sanctuary is evenly distributed, it's probably about, double the size of that. If there are 50 people seated on one side, there generally are 50 people seated on the other side. I know that it's it's not the hard scientific statistical procedure, but it works. It works well enough. It's an average or an estimate. And then yesterday I was at the march, the Salute to Israel parade. It was almost impossible from where I was standing to get a number of the people there. I really didn't try to count. Um, in the news reports, it said there were thousands of people, thousands of people. You know, can you get an accurate report?
I had 50,000,
That,
50,
that feels
50,000.
that feels
What,
right. That feels
what
right.
I heard.
I was situated at 61st and First, and the crowds went down all the way to 47th Street and up to 72nd Street or 70, Fourth, I think. Uh, and I guess, it's a 30 blocks, and we probably had about 1,200 to 1,500 people on our block. So, you can do the math and come up with an estimate. There was a rally in Tel Aviv Saturday night. Estimates are that 120,000 people were there. And I suppose with more and more artificial intelligence, we will be able to have more and more accurate um, enumerations of crowd sizes. I suspect that technology is there already. That it doesn't seem to me to be a hard lift for art. If I just want to say it this way, if artificial intelligence can give me the list of synonyms for a particular adjective that start with a particular letter and give me a whole list of that, it seems to me that artificial intelligence could be able to take a snapshot, an aerial photo, and count the heads there, and I think that's already here, or if it's not here, it's going to be here soon enough. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but so we typically we like to have hard numbers for the analysis of a population because we are so statistically oriented, and we don't necessarily speak anymore in metaphors for the large population. But in antiquity, obviously, they did speak in metaphors. And I'm just noting, Bob, you wrote here. What did you say? How does the following famous quote? Not everything that counts can be counted, and everything can be counted counts. Exactly. And so in some ways that functions here as a kind of leitmotif, which is, what are we counting when we count things here? I'm going to now give you some of the classic texts, and their comparisons, the metaphors that the Torah uses for a population, specifically in the promises that are made to the patriarchs. In chapter 13, when God first, God says in chapter, when he says, Lech lecha, he says, I'll make you a great nation. But after the first crisis with Lot at the beginning. They separate. So he says, "Sanai necha ure'eh min hamakom asher ata sham tzafona v'negba k'veked b'miyama." Lift up your eyes and see from the place where you are, to the north, to the Negev, to the east, to the sea. Ki et kol haaretz, I'm going to give you all the land to your seed. V'samti et zaracha ki afar haaretz. I will make your seed like the dust of the earth, so that if a man were able to measure the dust of the earth, so too could your seed be measured. So already, you have to appreciate that God is speaking to Abraham, and God is speaking not in literal terms. God is speaking in metaphoric terms. I mean, it's almost. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, just because we'll get a few of these. But it's almost as if saying, "Look, I'm going to give you a hyperbolic statement. I'm going to exaggerate the statement, because after all, I'm God. I know I have the number. I have the number of people, right?
Right.
I will be able to enumerate them, but I'm going to put it in your imagination such that it will be so vast, it will be like the dust of the earth, that if you can measure it, you'll see that that's what your population is going to be. Now, as I said, the effect of that is twofold. It's an effect of wonder, right? Wow, that's quite a lot. I mean, I'm seated at my desk. There's plenty of dust on my desk, right? I don't want to take a magnifying glass and count all the grains. That's ridiculous. So already I know that I'm in the world of poetry, and dust, that's significant. Okay, let me I have a few other examples of dust, and then we go to sand. Okay, so then God says to Jacob, when Jacob is having the dream of with the ladder, etc., the angels going up and down the ladder in chapter 28. God says, standing over him, he said, "I am God, God of Abraham, God of father, land in which you lie, I give your seed. Your seed will be like the dust of the earth. You'll spread out, you'll burst forth to the sea, to the east, to the north, to the south, and all the clans of the soil will find blessing through you, through your seed." Again, stunning statement, which is, you're going to have a vast population. Okay, next. Those are the only two times that afar is used. Dust with Abraham, dust in the promise to Jacob. And look where else it occurs, when Bilam is asked to curse the people. Instead, he blesses them, and in the blessing, he says, "Who can measure the dust of Yaakov? Mi mana afar Yaakov, umispar et rova Yisrael tamot," or find a number of the dust clouds of Israel. Tamot nafshi mot yisharim, uti achriti kamo. May I die the death of the upright, may my future be like his. In other words, it's impossible. It's impossible to count. All right, we'll move now to sand, where it says, God to Abraham after the Akedah, "Kivarecha varechecha v'arba arbe et zaracha kechochvei hashamayim b'chachol asher al sfat hayam." I will make you like the star. I'll give the stars in a second, but it's here like the sand on the shore of the sea, and your seed shall possess the gates of their enemy. Again, sand. When Jacob reiterates God's promise, he comes back from Haran, and he's about to meet his brother Esav, and he says, "Hatileni nami yadachi," save me from my brother. "V'ata amarta," you told me, "Hetevi tivimach," I will deal well with you. I will make your seed like the sand of the sea. So here we have an interesting kind of textual problem. God never made the promise to Jacob that the seed will be like sand. God did make the promise that it will be like dust. So there is a conflation here, but whatever. It's the image that's important to us in this one. And then I pulled this out, even though there are a few occurrences of this metaphor later on in the Bible. This one is very, very important. Vayam Yispar Bnei Yisrael Kechol Hayam. The number of the people of Israel shall be like that of the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured. Asher lo yimad velo yisafer. Vayam bimkom asher yamar lehem lo ami atem yamer lehem bnei Elkai. Instead of being told, you are not my people, they shall be called the children of the living God. So all of these are images of large, large numbers, and they take us into the world of exaggeration, dust and sand. Sand is dust is probably the dust of how you walk, where you walk, in deserts and in on paths. Sand is the sand of the sea, so it does take you out of your present reality and place you into the reality of earth and what you see in front of you. And now, of course, we're going to get the stars. And this might be more familiar to us because we tend to refer to this one. When God makes the covenant of the pieces with Abraham, he takes him outside. And here it's, very romantic moment, romantic in the sense that it does take us into an imaginative world. Vayomer, he says to him, Habetna Shamaima, look up to the heavens, Usfora Kochavim, and count the stars, Im Tuchal Isporotam, if you're able to count them. Vayomer lo, Ko Yeh Zarecha, thus shall you be, shall your seed be. This is incredibly important. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, only to say that in areas where there's no light pollution, one of the great moments of grandeur that a person can experience is looking to the night sky. And when you look to the night sky in a place where there's no other kind of pollution and when there's not a lot of moonlight, you see a vast, vast number of stars. And if you know a little bit of your basic astronomy, you'll recognize a few constellations. You'll recognize the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, Orion, and other famous that is identifiable constellations. If you know a little more astronomy, you'll know that, let's say, in the belt of Orion, there are clusters of stars, and that if you know like a little bit about the Big Dipper, you'll know that some of those stars are bigger than other stars. This knowledge was not known to antiquity because they certainly didn't have the ocular ability to see all of this. But what they did have the ability to see with the unaided eye was vastness, and that if you had clear enough vision, you could make out the fact that there were just lots and lots of stars, and that if you tried to count them, the mind, could only hold a certain number at one point. You can't, I mean, there is some study on this. What's the maximum number of things of identity that you can hold in your mind in a glance? Like I mentioned, counting people in the shul. So I could count, with relative ease a few rows of people, but then I have to estimate because, in a quick motion, my eye can only interpret what the visual information in front of me and have a very clear picture of that. I mean, was it 7, 12? I mean, there's a finite number, a finite maximum of identifiable things that you can place a number on. After that, you get very confused and very difficult. So it's the experience of seeing the vastness of the heavens that we're talking about, and it's the experience that you're not able to count. It's almost at the same time as vast, and it's also frustrating, and it doesn't need to be either. It's just the experience of vastness. Now I'm going to show you a couple more of these, and then we'll talk about this. So we have again the Akedah. The Akedah actually has both metaphors, Kechochvei Hashemayim v'chachol asher asfat hayam, like the stars of the heavens and the sand, and we'll talk about that in a second through the Midrash. And God to Isaac, during the famine, here Beiti et zaracha kechochvei Hashemayim, I will make you like the stars of heaven. And then Moses, when Moses asked God to forgive Israel after the golden calf, he says, recall Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yisrael, your servants, Zechor Avraham, Yitzhak, Israel, Avadecha, who you swore by them, and you said, Arbe zarachem kechochvei hashamayim, I will make your seed as many as the stars of heaven. Asher amarti etin lazarachem v'chalul alam. I will give this land as promised, and I will give your seed so they may inherit it for ages. And one more, or two more, we have Deuteronomy, Moses in Deuteronomy at the beginning, it says, God made you like the stars in the heaven. He's looking out at a vast population. And then at the end, he is saying, in a moment where he is saying, what happens to you if you don't follow the commandments? He says, you will be left, you will be left small in number. You once were like the stars in the heavens in abundance, but since you did not hearken to the Lord, your numbers will fall. And so what we have here then is a whole cluster of three basic metaphors. The number as dust, number as sand, number as stars. And each of these is intended to give the idea of vastness and innumerability of the people. Now, here's the nagging problem as a reader and as someone who is kind of, I'm going to do the interpretive trick, which is I'm going to imagine myself as if I am Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, hearing this. And so what I'm hearing God say to me is, it's going to be a vast number. So you're going to have such a big population. Okay. Then I'm going to do the imaginative activity, which is, well, we are compared to the Chinese, let's say, or compared to the population of the United States, let's say, or compared to India, we're a very small population. In fact, compared to the world, what are we in terms of percentage of the world? 0.03%. The world's population is now about 7 billion, and Jews number maybe 15, 16 million. So we're a very, very small population in the world, notwithstanding the fact that when you put 40,000 people together on Fifth Avenue, it looks like a large group, and that may be the frame of reference, and that when you muster yourselves all together and you make an assembly, it's a feeling of largeness. It's a feeling of a great population. Oh, 1 second. And that you can have that feeling when you are in a large mass of people in attendance at a rally, a game, a conference, that kind of thing. I'll give you just one more little anecdotal thing, which is prior to the pandemic, the largest gathering of Jews in the United States outside of the Israel parade, which was, on a good year, it would have been about 50, 60,000, maybe more. And don't forget also the rally in Washington, which happened in November, which the estimate was 300,000 people. That was a very large gathering of people. So we don't experience this often, and we then have to relate to ourselves in different ways. Susie, go ahead.
So when you look at the genetic descendants of the expulsion from Spain, that comes to like another few hundred million, actually.
So I mean, I'll only extrapolate from that and to say that if you were to, you know, do the natural population increases, go back to Spain and even further, uh, it should have been that the population of the Jewish people should be in the hundreds of millions. That's what you're saying, basically. And so what that makes us confront a very, very harsh reality, which is that our population should have been much, much larger than it is. Look, we have the last 7,500 years of the Jewish experience to prove that. If 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, I'm not saying if, I'm saying, using as a mathematical problem, what is the potential population that was lost? Well, of the survivors, you could extrapolate the population from the survivors. If we are almost back to the pre-war population after 75 years, that means that among the survivors, the 1 to 2 million survivors of the Holocaust, there's been that ability of the entire Jewish people to almost come back to pre-war numbers. That's a devastating piece of data, I think. On the other hand, you have in Israel the fertility rate is much higher than Jews throughout the world, and it's much higher than economically developed countries in the Western world. The fertility rate, it's over 2. It may be in the high, the high 2 point fractions of between 2 and 3. Very, very well above replacement levels, which is and which it means that the fertility rate is very high. It means relative to Western countries, the United States, we as much as we would like to think that we have some population problems here, we do have population issues just over the horizon. Certainly Russia and certainly Western European countries, and Japan, these are countries that are well below replacement levels in terms of population, and are going to see a contraction of their populations in significant terms, that will have both strategic and political ramifications down the line. So I it's interesting to look at these texts, from the perspective of statisticians, and I do enjoy doing that since there's a lot of data in these texts, especially in the census at the beginning and the census at the end, and then we have a number which is 603,550 men of fighting age, a number that is so completely beyond the what is sustainable in a desert community, and that number itself is a subject to great scholarly debates. What is it, a symbolic number? Is it a real number? What does it mean? How do you interpret it? And what's the Torah saying here? The Torah is giving us a set of statistics, a set of numbers, but this Torah is also giving us poetry. And the Torah is basically saying, at least as far as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are concerned, I'm going to make you a big people. I'm going to take you you're just a family, basically, and you're having a difficult time getting started as a population, and I'm going to turn you into a people. And it's not a hard leap of the imagination to say that, to look at someone who has a lot of children and a lot of grandchildren to say, well, you're destined to be a clan and a tribe and a people. I mean, we have, people who live in families where the 12 children is the norm, and then they have, many dozens of grandchildren, and then many, many, scores of great grandchildren. These experiences are part of the world that we live in, especially in the ultra-Orthodox communities, where you can see, people have these big photographs of a whole, clan of people, numbering in the hundreds already. Uh, the two great grandparents seated prominently in the middle with a team of people around them, all of them related to each other, big families, and it you would think, okay, we're maybe a few generations, and from that we're going to get large populations, um, and this puts into perspective, both the trends in general in Judaism and in the Jewish people. When we do Jewish population studies, we notice, one blaring fact, which is that there are certain sectors of the Jewish people that are growing exponentially, and certain sectors of the Jewish people that are contracting. I don't want to say exponentially, but they're experiencing tremendous contraction, and that if we were to kind of freeze dry ourselves and reemerge 100 years from now, we would see a Jewish people that would be largely, or at least 50%. I'm just throwing that number out. Ultra Orthodox, and the rest not. Now that doesn't control for a lot of different factors, namely, all the factors that have gone into changing populations and the numbering of populations. It doesn't take into account any kind of historical developments which we cannot foresee, even where we are. We don't know, uh, how wars are going to play themselves out. We don't know how diseases are going to play themselves, and we don't know, if there will be movements in the future that will shatter populations and kind of shake people into different kinds of patterns of life. None of this is predictable, but what is being spoken here is that you'll have a numerous population. Okay. Any comments on that? All right, so let's go to the Midrash. The Midrash is going to do what Midrash does, and it's for us, since I'm so focused on the text a lot. I like to say, going into the Midrash is like taking a fresh bath. It's like taking a fresh experience into a different realm of the imagination, and asking a different set of questions, and asking basically, what does it say and what does it mean? That's what the Midrash is doing. The Midrash is looking at textual problems and looking also at theological. But Marlene, you had your hand up for a second. Go ahead.
Could the numbers also be influence, sphere of influence?
In terms of what their effect is,
The
or
dust of the earth, we're everywhere. I mean, take the cell phone alone.
that clearly is, one element of the range of interpretations that we can give to this. That when it says you'll be scattered, I think it's certainly one of those kinds of interpretations, which is that, yeah, you will be part of the world. That is to say, you will have influence in the world. Not only, of course,
But there's also no end point, because it says you will be, and then we count the people and there are a couple 100,000. And then if you count the women and the children and those men who are not eligible, it still isn't the grand number, but we don't know when that would be.
right. We don't know what the critical mass is.
Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema.
No, it's interesting. So it's a great. I guess it would be a sociological study or an anthropological study, a question, which is, at what point do what constitutes a critical mass of people that where you can do stuff. Okay, we know, for example, in synagogue life, um, you know, you can run a committee by one person, right? But and you know, certainly two people can get a job done better. What's the number that makes a difference? Is it 5, 6, 7? You know, and what's the sweet spot in terms of the size of a class, for example, or the size of of attendance? You know, we have room. There's a little sign at in the sanctuary that says this room can seat, you know, I don't know, 400 people, something like that. You know, would that 400 people show up every Shabbat? You know, what would that mean? It would feel quite full, and it would feel there would be a different sense there, and you'd get a different kind of voice, and you'd get a different kind of energy. And by the way, that would be an energy that many people would like, and that would be an energy that many people would not like. Some people like the experience of a large group. Some people like the experience of a small group, etc., etc. So here we go. So Bob, you're asking, does the Midrash discuss why a census now in the Tanakh? And the Midrash that I'm going to study doesn't discuss that. But the one that I'm going to do with your indulgence will be one that relates to the metaphors, okay? And why did that not go to that one? Let's just do this one up properly. Okay. Here we go. So what we have here is this is the midrash. This is from Bemidbar Rabbah. I enjoyed this midrash very much. I'm gonna probably write about it for Shabbat since it'll be away. Mishalan be'afar, mishalan b'kochavim. It likened them to dust, and it likened them to stars. Just let me just clear out the lines, get a little. In this world, they're likened to dust. Ba'olam hazeh mishulim be'afar. And now he tells us what that means. Ma afar haaretz atzui dayish l'chol ba'ei olam. Just as the dust of the earth is made for trampling by all mankind, so Israel is made for trampling by all the nations of the world. As it is stated, the king Aram had destroyed them, and he rendered them like dust to be trampled. It's interesting. Dust is trampling. This is not a particularly uplifting text. This is more a sour, downtrodden, a more skeptical, pessimistic view, right? You are compared to dust because people trample on you. Okay.
Yeah, but it sticks to you and you can't get rid of it.
Well, let's go on. Alternatively, the dust of the earth, if it's not present, man cannot exist. So on the one hand, you took a negative look at it, but on the other hand, look, you need it. If there's no dust, there's no trees, no grain. So if there's no Israel, Ein Yisrael, Ein Olam Yitkayem. Look at this. I don't want to say chauvinism, but this is the necessity of the Jewish people. Well, you're saying you trample all over us. On the other hand, if you didn't have us, the world wouldn't be able to exist. There's no Israel. So if there's no Israel, the world cannot exist. As it is stated, all nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants. So just live with that, dichotomy, for example, for a moment, which on the one hand, we're so low, we're trampled on. On the other hand, we're so important that the world can't exist without us. In this world, they're likened to dust. In Messianic times, they're likened to the sand of the sea. Just as the sand typically damages one's teeth. Likewise, in Messianic time, Israel will eliminate all the nations. Whoa! One from Jacob will rule, etc. I will set my vengeance on Edom. This is how you kind of spiritually arm a people that has been oppressed and downtrodden and persecuted. You give them the spiritual means in order to imagine that one day they will vanquish their enemies. This is how a persecuted people develops its antibodies. Okay? Devar acher. Why are they compared to sand? Ma chol adam notel mimenu melo kumtzo. Just as Sand, if a person takes a handful from it and adds it to dough or to a cooked item, no person can taste it because it damages his teeth. So are Israel. Anyone who plunders them or robs them in this world, he damages his teeth in the future. Why? It is because it is Israel sacred. As it stated, Israel is sacred to the Lord, the first of his crop. All is devoured will be guilty. Evil will come upon them. In other words, say, look, there's a potency to Israel, right? It just a little amount can damage you. That is to say, if you mistreat them. Okay, we go on. Another matter. This is I like this one. Like the sand of the sea, just as typically a person places sand into the fire and takes it out as chunks, and they craft glass vessels from it, so Israel enter into the fire and emerge alive. As it is stated, then Nebuchadnezzar approached the gate of the burning fiery furnace and called the servants of God Most High, emerge, etc. In the future, too, they enter Gehenna, and the nations of the world enter there. They, the nations of the world, enter there and will perish. Israel emerges there in peace. As it is stated, when you walk into fire, you'll not be burned. Why? For I am the Lord your God, supporting you to your right. That is why I liken to sand. I'm going to stop here and just stop to share for a second. So here now we're getting into the world of poetic imagination. What's sand, right? Any of you have been to a glass factory? You know that glass is made from sand. It's, the chemical structure of glass is silica. It's a silicate. And so you take the sand, you heat it to a high temperature to where it becomes molten, and the molten sand, is able to change chemically so that it becomes the molten crystals of glass. And you take your pipe, you blob the glass against the pipe, and then you blow it, and that's how you can make glass. If you go to Corning, New York, you can go to the glass factory there. And if you go to any of the towns on the Hudson River, the glass industry is one of the big industries of the 19th century. On the Hudson, I'm thinking of Beacon and Hudson. They still have glass factories. Why? Because there were a lot of sand deposits in the area from the glaciers. We don't have the Metzes here. Bob Metz, our resident geologist. I always like to talk about glaciation. I think that that's one of the great miracles of North America is the evidence of the ice age of the last, I don't know how many thousands of years. But if you take a short trip north, you'll encounter lots of sand deposits that were left over from many geological eras, and the early pioneers were able to take advantage of that. They understood how to make glass, and they made a glass industry there in the 19th century, and to a certain extent even now. But what he's saying here is not about industrial history. He's talking about metaphors. He's saying, Israel, if you oppress them, what happens? They get stronger. They become beautiful. They become something other. They become something that is hardened and something that will show off light in a different way. And that's the metaphor of sand to glass. Okay, let me go on. And now we're going to go to stars. So here we have, in the future, it likened them to stars. Just as the stars shine in the entire firmament, so they will shine in the future. As it said, the wise will shine like the radiance of the firmament. So we have the idea that Israel gives light and wisdom to the world. Why were they likened to the stars and not to the sun or the moon? Because Abraham was likened to the sun, Isaac was likened to the moon, Jacob was the stars. In the future, the sun and the moon will be ashamed. So there's there's all sorts of problems with this. I'm going to just skip that. And then we're going to go to this one. This one is a beautiful one. Davar acher, ma kochavim kolkim kavod ze lazeh. Stars honor each other, and there's peace between them. V'shalom beinehem, as it is stated, Oseh shalom bimramah. He makes peace in the heights. Kach hem tzadikim. This is the righteous. Oavim ze lazeh. They love each other. Kishem shekochavim einam merivim ze im ze. Kach hem tzadikim. Just as the stars do not quarrel with one another, so it is with the righteous. And so what we have here is, I make you like stars. It's not I'm making you stars as numerous as heaven. I'm making you quality. I'm making quality, a quality people, a people that will be tzaddikim. And what is the essence, the essential quality of righteousness? Kavod. Respecting each other. It's such a lovely, it's a beautiful, davar matok. It's a sweet, sweet teaching, which is how do you live in harmony as the harmony, the stars, to the unaided eye, when you look in the heavens, you see that there's a harmony among the stars, notwithstanding the fact that if you just glance at the Hubble telescope first, you see that there's a lot of violence among the stars. The stars are exploding. The stars are collapsing. There's a lot of dynamism in the astronomical world, right? But to us, it all looks like it's at peace and they're in harmony. And to us, looking at the stars, we see that they simply get along with each other and they show respect to each other. And so that's why Israel is compared to stars. It's as numerous as the stars, certainly in terms of number, but in terms of your future, there will be harmony to them. Let's see if there's any more here. Another matter, just as the stars dominate only at night, so Israel dominates only at night due to the yoke of the kingdom. Also, fascinating line. Ma kochavim einam sholtin ela balayla, kach Yisrael einam sholtin ela balayla, mipnei ol malchut. Which means, the world is dark. The world has a lot of darkness to it. And Israel shines at night when the world is dark. And then this last one, just one star can burn the entire universe, okay, a world. Like Elijah, the righteous fervor, so too Israel, okay? Israel has that potential, with that power. So what do we have here? We have numbers, we have statistics, we have the idea of populations, we have the idea that it should have been the Jewish people should number in the hundreds of millions now, but it doesn't. And that's one of the catastrophical pieces of reality of Jewish population, is that our numbers should be much larger than they in fact are. But then when we shift over to the world of imaginative and the world of poetry, what we have then is the metaphors of dust, sand, and stars. Dust, you could say on the one hand, it's trampled. On the other hand, it's necessary. You need all the grains of sand, all the grains of dust in order to have something grow from it. Sand is everywhere, but sand also produces glass. The stars are in heaven, and the stars are limitless, but the stars are also the things that give light to a darkened world, and the stars exhibit harmony. And once you start speaking in metaphorical language, not in specific language, quite literally, the sky is the limit. It can be anything. And in fact, we do have other examples of these metaphors and developed in different midrashim, and they take it into all sorts of different directions. All right, I'll open up to any of your questions or comments now. Bob, you mentioned something else there, and I didn't see it.
No, I didn't. I just had that comment about why the census now, but it strikes me that this may be a stretch, but the Pope came out with Laudato Si, which was sort of an eco-spirituality perspective on the environment. And it almost sounds like you're discussing what some people may have called geotheology or geo-spirituality in terms of not just the ecology, but sort of how you connect the natural environment, if you will, space, sand, dust, and all that, with how that gets informed. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that. Are you talking about a theogeology?
No, I'm just talking about poetry and metaphor, and we may want to give it a different title, but I'll put myself in the class of readers, students, teacher, and someone who looks to the the Bible for insight in terms of language and in terms of a way of looking at the world, and poetry, of course, and trying to understand how the poetic imagination of the Torah and later the Bible and of course the rabbis shapes our world. And so where I'm going with this is that it does shape a theology, if you will, but it's answering a theological question, which is really, what is our place in the world, and how do you confront the biblical promise of being a vast people with the reality that you're actually a very small people, and how do you reconcile that? And one way of reconciling that is by trying to understand your impact and trying to understand influence and trying to read that influence back into the text and show that, when it says sand, it means this, and when it says stars, it means this, and that these are metaphors for things that are beyond just the simple application of a statistical reality. Go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
Just want to add one more thing, that what I also find compelling in what you're saying is I was listening to uh, a number of different Orthodox rabbis who said that in Bemidbar, part of the counting process is showing the interconnectedness and the unity that can exist within the diversity that's there, whether, of all the different tribes, of all the different people, the names. And you're now bringing in the geological environment, if you will, that we are also interconnected, not just with human beings, but with dust, with sand, with stars. And so it's a very expansive, gigantic web that it sounds to me like you're weaving. One of the other last comments I would say, which was really interesting, was the discussion around the tachash and the what's the name of the snail Tzellet, that covers
Ozone,
the
yeah.
right, and they said it's multicolored, and the multicolored aspect was an indication of diversity, but the Tchelet blue of the sky would not wash away, would not be affected by heat, and so that would be tenacious and resilient. And so by bringing diversity together with tenaciousness and being steadfast, that's how you travel, with everything. So it was just a very interesting Hasidic sort of
Yeah, no,
perspective.
these are lovely ideas, and you know, the idea that the tribes, each tribe has its own characteristic, its own emblems and flags, etc. And how you build a confederacy, a federation of all those tribes into one unit, and that is part of the theme going forward, that the tribes become a people, and that the people takes its place in the land. It's dealt with a little bit in these chapters, but then you'll get to a much more a developed treatment in the later books of the Bible, beginning from Joshua, where Joshua is conquering the land, and the judges, there are different experiences in different geographical portions of the land. And it's not until David that the tribes become a whole federation, united together in one capital. Ilana, go ahead.
I like the comparison to the stars because stars represent beauty. So it
Yeah.
could be inner beauty and outside beauty.
External beauty, exactly. And
right, for the
you
Jewish
know,
people.
that's right. So the stars, again, these are images that will help, for us to conceptualize the way that we are to live. There's the verse in Psalms, which I didn't include here, but it's Monem mispar lakochavim v'chulam shemot yikra. God numbers all the stars in heaven and has a name for each of them. Well, that's such a classic text about you've been called stars. God promised that you will be as numerous as the stars in heaven, and God has a name for all the stars, and therefore every single one of you is identified in your own position and in your own characteristics, and God is aware of you. So God can, while my mind can only look at, maybe a maximum of a dozen things and hold that as a group in my head, God obviously has a much bigger mind. Go ahead, Marlene, and then
We say that in the morning davening.
Yes, that's correct.
About numbering the stars.
That's right. Stanley Messer.
Yeah, I don't seem to have the response for the hand, so that's why I've put my
No
hand up this way. Well, look, it seems to me on the face of it, God has not kept his promise. However you regard it, metaphor or whatever, we should be many more people. However, we don't really know what God's time frame is. I mean, our history goes back, 3,000 years?
Sure.
Maybe the best is yet to come. So, I mean, that's one way of understanding that God is yet to keep his word.
Well, I think what you highlight is the deep theological crisis, the deep theological crisis of especially from a post-Holocaust perspective, which is that the covenant is not intact. That and Yitzhak Greenberg used to talk about this all the time. That we do our best to keep our part of the deal, and God let us down. And so that is part of the mix here in terms of the way contemporary Jews will read these texts. We can read them with a great deal of promise and a great deal of anguish, and I think that we can't catastrophize too much on this, and we'll say, okay, so the best is yet to come on this, or we will yet be able to replenish the numbers. When you think about the kinds of numbers of people that in Israel, the people that were killed, and the soldiers, each one a world, etc. And there's the tremendous potential that is the potential that is lost here. That's what we're talking about. Okay. Skip Rogers, go ahead.
Rabbi, think about stars, dust, and sand.
It's all the same.
They're all the same, but they are not finite.
Yeah.
And just like the Jews, we are not finite.
That's right.
And if you look at it, the way I look at it, stars, dust, and sand are foundation stone.
Nice.
And if you look at the Jews as a foundation to the world, you look at it from a different perspective.
That's a good point. One more piece of metaphor. All right, everyone.